coming down today to be with us on Alberta's economic crisis. What is the way forward?
Well, good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen. I'd like to welcome you today to today's session of Speaker's Corner. My name is Gabor Zinner. I'm a local lawyer and also the founder of Speaker's Corner. And recently I've also been referring to myself as the self-proclaimed Grand Mufti of Tompkin Park. Does anyone here not know the meaning of Grand Mufti? I'll explain it. Okay, great. It gives me an opportunity. So muftis are Muslim scholars who interpret and expound Islamic law. And the foremost amongst them in each country is called the Grand Mufti. And there's about 18 of them currently around on the planet in various countries. And as I frequently acknowledge, I don't know a thing about Muslim law or Islamic law, but that's never held anyone back before. So it's a bit of a joke, okay? Anyone here for the first time? All right, so for your benefit, let me just give a bit of a background about Speaker's Corner. As you can tell, it's intended to be a fresh air experience, offering the community an opportunity to exchange ideas on contemporary and relevant topics. It draws its inspiration from Hyde Park, which has been going for 165 years in London, England. And this is a place where people get up on a soapbox and they talk, they rant and rave, and they get heckled. And at some point, about 4 or 5 years ago, I thought it would be a good idea to transplant the tradition to Calgary and that it may serve the community. Since then, we've had many good debates. There were times when we've had a bank of 8 TV cameras recording the event. All our, it's really interesting because you never really know what attracts the attention of the media. One time, we had this lady debating the leader of the Wild Rose at the time on the Keystone Pipeline. You know, you'd think that would draw the attention of the media. There wasn't a soul. Well, not quite, but it was very sparsely attended. You have an Egyptian debate, 8 TV cameras. In any event, today we have a really important topic for debate, and we're privileged to have 4 well-informed individuals address the topic. We have 2 MLAs and 2 leaders of 2 provincial parties. And I really, truly am grateful for their attendance, even though I have not yet heard what they're about to say. And so there we go. I'd like to invite Dr. Aaliyah Bailey to introduce the speakers. Let me just acknowledge Dr. Bailey. These events don't just materialize by themselves. There's a lot of time and effort that goes into reaching out to the speakers, finding topics, finding speakers. And this is the lady who does all the heavy lifting and who in fact got our 4 speakers. So I'm truly grateful to her, as we all should be. And on that note, Aaliyah, please come and introduce the first speaker, who I think will be Janet Keeping. Aaliyah.
With all the Benadryl in me right now, I think I'd be okay.
There. Keep an eye on these.
I will give these to you to hide somewhere. Well, again, thank you everyone for being here today. Apologize, I'm a little bit under the weather. I'm not going to mention drugs since the cops are sitting there with their windows open. So today, again, our debate is on the Alberta economic crisis and what is the way forward. This is something that we as Albertans and Calgarians need to talk about. We need to come up with some solutions. We need to hold our electoral candidates responsible. We elected them. It's our job to make sure that they do the job that we ask them to. So today we have a few people who are very busy, take time out of their schedules to come down. So I'd like to say thank you to all of them. And right now, I'm just going to introduce everyone since we're having a forum today. I'll introduce them all at once, and then each one will have their turn to say what their thoughts are. Then we will discuss it. Then we will be having an open mic to the audience to ask questions. Okay? So first, we're going to start with Karen McPherson, who is the MLA for Nose Hill McKay, and our NDP representative. Here in a second. Karen comes to government with a wealth of experience as a business analyst, a career which has afforded her the opportunity to develop the transferable skill set necessary to understand issues which affect people, business, and the culture that they function within. Part of the charm, he says. Okay. Sorry. Skills necessary that people, yes, but she has a solid understanding of business, drivers, and processes, and a deep understanding of the energy industry. Karen was born in Edmonton, where she lived until they moved to Sexsmith in Alberta when she was 5. They then moved to nearby Grand Prairie when Karen was in grade 6, and she subsequently finished her secondary education there. She attended Grand Prairie Regional College and then spent a few years working in the retail sector before having her first child. She then returned to university, worked as a temporary receptionist, then began her career in the energy industry, which soon became her home. From receptionist to administrative assistant, she found her niche in information technologies. First as a software instructor, then as a systems analyst and developer. From there, she parlayed her experience into a career as business analyst, where Karen developed a high degree of competency in research, analysis and critical thinking, and was well respected as a strong leader and a team player. She then moved to England with her children and spent a year and a half working for a metals manufacturing company, heading up their collaborative infrastructure for all of Europe. She then transferred to their sister company in Massachusetts, architecting collaboration solutions for the US and Europe. After the company was acquired, she returned to Calgary and continued as a consulting business analyst in the oil and gas sector. Karen's journey into political life actually began with some initial political science courses back in Grand Prairie College. And even before that, in high school, attending the Forum for Young Albertans. She was and is intensely interested in government and governance. Sorry, stuffed up. She is interested in how government processes affect people and their daily lives. She loves to travel and also enjoys art, painting, and cycling. Next, we have beside her Janet Keeping, the leader of the Alberta Green Party. Janet was born in Montreal, and she lived in Quebec, Southern Ontario, and Boston, Massachusetts area. She obtained a Bachelor of Science at the Massachusetts Institute of Technology in 1971. In 1973, she moved to Calgary, where she took her master's in philosophy and then a law degree at the University of Calgary. After articling with the law firm Bennett Jones, Janet, lost my spot, co-founded and became the first executive director of the Alberta Civil Liberties Research Centre. From 1984 to 2006, Ms. Keeping did legal research and public legal education for the Canadian Institute of Resources Law at the University of Calgary. In that position, she worked on human rights, environmental protection, and accommodations for Aboriginal interests in the context of oil and gas development. She was the Institute's director of Russian programs from 1994 to 2006, traveling widely in Russia to organize professional development seminars and energy regulations and policy. From 2006 to 2012, Janet served as president of the Sheldon Schumer Foundation for Ethics in Leadership. In September of 2012, Janet was elected leader of the Green Party of Alberta, and she lives in the Northwest Calgary, where she and her husband raised their 3 children. Janet. And next, we have Greg Clark, our MLA and leader of the Alberta Party. Greg was elected as a member of the Legislative Assembly of Alberta for Calgary Elbow in May 5, 2015. He currently serves on the Standing Committee for Resources Stewardship and is a member of the Select Special Ethics and Accountability Committee. Prior to his election, Mr. Clark taught business management at the University of Calgary. He also worked as a consultant and project manager in an IT industry for over 10 years. In 2006, along with 2 partners, Mr. Clark co-founded the technology counseling firm C3 Associates. The firm earned a distinction as one of Alberta's Ventures 50 fast-growing companies in 2011 and 2012. C3 Associates was also named one of Canada's top 250 information technology companies by the Branham Group in 2012 and 2013. Mr. Clark's community involvement is extensive. His contributions include being co-chair of the parent council of his children's school, coaching of his daughter's soccer team, a volunteer with Calgary Reads to promote literacy, and vice chair of the Disease Center for Calgary. Following the 2013 flood in southern Alberta, he co-founded the Calgary River Communities Action Group. Mr. Clark holds an MBA with a specialization in knowledge management from Mount Royal Roads University and a Bachelor of Arts in Political Sciences and Sociology from the University of Victoria. And last but not least, and our youngin', Keenan McNeil. Keenan has been an active member of the debate scene for more than a decade. I know, he doesn't look that old. And in the debate scene for more than a decade as a competitor, judge, organizer, and coach. His passion for debate, obsessive curiosity, and eccentric sense of humor have made him well known in the Canadian debate community. Keenan has regularly helped coach Team Canada since 2011. The students he previously coached have won major tournaments from the local to national levels, and many have gone on to compete internationally. Make me cry. 205 of the debating members on Team Canada for 2015 are actually his former students. As a debater, he is best known for his role as the second speaker in 2010 for Team Canada, which won the gold at that year's World School Debating Championship in Doha, if I'm saying it right, Qatar, ending a 22-year drought for Canada on the world stage. In Canada, Keenan reached break rounds at all 6 national championships he attended, as a junior semi-finalist in 2007, junior finalist in 2006, quarter-finalist in 2008, semi-finalist in 2009 and 2010, and at the CUSID quarter-finals in 2012. He graduated from McGill University in 2013, and he is the owner as an entrepreneur. He started up his own company and is the main coach at Trivium School of Debate, which is a private coaching service for promising young debaters. Thank you very much. So now what we're going to do is we're going to start with our first speaker. Each speaker will get 10 to 15 minutes to give their view on what we need to do, and then we will possibly ask them a few questions, and then we will open the mic to the public. Thank you.
Yeah. Oh, you mean a stand? No. Let's not bother with that right now. We'll see how it goes. Okay. I'm very happy to have been invited to speak here today. I do enjoy these events, notwithstanding some of the local sources of noise and so on. And I really admire the effort. I really think that what Gabor and Alaya and colleagues are doing here is really important. We need tons more of this sort of thing. Way more opportunities where citizens come together to discuss the big issues of our times. Having said that, questions about the economy are never my favorite, so I'll do my best to be enthusiastic and animated and opinionated. I don't have to try very hard to be opinionated, but I even think, I'll even go so far as to say, I think the whole way we think about economics is upside down. And I think that's one source of the panic which the current changes tend to induce in Albertans. I think the way typically, and I've lived in Alberta since 1973, I think typically the question has been, how do you make it in Alberta? Well, you fit yourself into this overarching oil and gas industry, so you go get the degree in geology or information, management or whatever so you can fit into that industry, or you go somewhere else. So that this is sort of the picture. And now that there are big forces at work in the world that threaten growth in the oil and gas industry, in particular the reactions to climate change, that this is what induces the panic. Whereas if you thought about economics the other way round, what is it that individual Albertans want to do to be productive and creative in our society, and try to enable them to do that and make that possible and make it possible for them to earn livelihoods that way, you'd see it a completely different way. That's a very un-economist sort of way of thinking about economics, but I think it looks at our economy from the point of view of what maximizes the well-being of human beings as opposed to what maximizes the well-being of our dominant industry, which is the oil and gas industry. So that's just my introduction. My actual prepared notes are going to sound very much more like what you would expect a Green Party person to say about the economy, and so I'll get started. So I want to make, notwithstanding the difficulties or the obstacles, I want to make 3 main points and then elaborate a little bit. First is this one. One thing we know of for sure is that the future is not going to be like the past. Furthermore, I'd say our current state of affairs is not even like the past. So we've got to prepare for change. We're seeing all sorts of forces, as I said before, that are exerting themselves on the Albertan economy and which are making it ever more difficult to burn carbon, and that's not going to go away. It's only going to be exacerbated. Nobody, including no Greens, are going to say that fossil fuels are going to disappear from the Alberta scene or from the Alberta economy. Nobody is saying that. But what people who are looking at the future realistically would say, and even, as I say, looking at what is happening in the media and decisions that are being made right now, is they have to play a smaller role in our economy. They have to, and they will. So we're already seeing evidence of the fact that change is upon us in this way. We've got concerns about climate change leading to serious talk and efforts to price carbon. Our own government, new ND government, has appointed an advisory panel to consult with Albertans about how we're going to put in place either a real carbon tax or a cap and trade system or something else that is going to make the burning of all hydrocarbons more expensive. That's going to happen. And it's going to happen relatively soon. The price that's imposed right now has gone up under our kind of half-baked carbon tax system, but it's going to be more so in the future. The ND government has committed to going to the international negotiations in Paris this winter, in early December, with a serious proposal as to how Alberta is going to reduce its carbon emissions. That is going to change things for the Alberta economy, which has already happened, right, with prices having dropped. I don't know how many of you will have heard of the expression stranded assets. It's being used increasingly by financial analysts to, as a reference, a label for oil and gas and other carbon reserves that have been identified by geologists and booked by companies and which can never be burned. They can never be burned because the consequence of burning them would be so disastrous for climate. So that's a very serious conversation now. Those are called stranded assets. They're assets on the books of companies now, but they're stranded because they can never be burned. And I think when you think about a city like Medicine Hat in southeastern Alberta, which has gone solar with its own municipal utility, and which shockingly elected a new Democrat in the recent general election. Change has come to Alberta and more is coming fast. Now I think change is inevitable anyway, and the kind of change I'm talking about, a lower carbon future, is coming. It is coming. So we can relax about that. There's no point arguing about whether change is going to come. The question is, why is that scary? Why is this a crisis? Why are we in crisis? And I think the most legitimate concern for we Albertans to have about this change is about jobs. Are there going to be jobs for Albertans today? Are there going to be jobs for our children and for our grandchildren? The good news is that, and let me just back up a minute. In my view, there's always been too much discussion when the price of oil goes down in Alberta about, oh my God, the threat to investment. I think, again, we have to look at the economy from the ordinary person's point of view. And the ordinary person's concern is about employment, because ordinary people either make it or don't financially if they have a job. And I think that is what people are really concerned about. And the good news in this context is that there are more jobs in the greener industries, whether we're talking about the greener ways of producing electricity, not burning coal, but doing more with our solar and wind and geothermal resources, or we're talking about other green industries. There are more jobs than in the traditional industries. And there are industries that are starting to develop in Alberta that are greener. One of the people who ran in the recent provincial election for the Green Party runs a small manufacturing company in Standard, Alberta, so east and a little bit north of Calgary. And his whole plant is off the grid. It is solar powered. It is happening. It is happening. Change is happening in Alberta in this regard, but not fast enough, I would say. Because I think as Albertans, what we have to be concerned about is that Alberta as a whole moves off carbon as soon as possible. So as opposed to the Canadian Association of Petroleum Producers, CAP, which had an op-ed in the Calgary Herald recently urging greater support for more investment so the oil sands can grow, that's exactly, Greens would say, the wrong direction in which to go. Wrong direction because it's a dinosaur industry. It's an industry that's in its sunset years, not coming to an abrupt halt, but which is going to be under increasing pressure either from low oil prices, which it already is, or from the increasing pressure on industries which produce a lot of greenhouse gases. So what I think Greens would urge Albertans to do is to think about and to urge government and business to get with the off fossil fuel industries sooner rather than later. Sooner? Why sooner rather than later? Why not wait until we're absolutely forced by increased pressures? Why? Because some of the opportunities will have been foregone by then. Some of the opportunities to get into manufacturing and so on of the greener technologies will have already been established somewhere else, some other jurisdiction that's been more friendly to green technology and is not held on so fiercely to the high carbon economy. So I'm going to wrap up at this point and say that's my general message, and that would be the general green message, that if we're worried about our economy, and I do agree we need to be worried about our economy, we want creative, imaginative developments. We want change. We want ideas for how we get off our high reliance on carbon. We burn more coal than all the rest of Canada combined to produce electricity. Our province burns more coal than all the rest of Canada combined to produce electricity. We don't need more investment in the oil sands. We need to slow the oil sands development down, clean it up, and transition off. And slowing it down has a huge benefit to Alberta, and that would extend the livelihood of the resource, sort of evening out our economy and leaving it less subject to these wild swings. So again, I'll wrap it up there. I'd rather not be speaking first. It's my least desirable option, but I got the short end of the stick, and thank you for your attention.
Sorry, folks, just put up with me for a minute. I didn't set this up earlier. Like usual.
It's a big umbrella.
Meaning I usually...
Could fit a family of 5.
If I may, it started to rain. The lady here has about an hour to go. If it starts to get worse, we can all sit
Sure, and then we don't need a microphone.
You guys want to do that now?
It's passing, it's going north. Like, it's
No, keep on going. Keep on going. It's good.
So we haven't.
I don't know. Can you...
It's moving as you see it. It's going north.
Can you hear me okay? Okay, thanks. So I just want to preface my remarks with saying that I'm very, very new to public speaking, and I appreciate your generous listening of me. So as Dr. Bailey said, my name is Karen McPherson, and I'm the MLA for Calgary, McKay, Nose Hill. I'm very excited about that, and I really appreciate the opportunity to be here this afternoon and to listen to my colleagues on the panel and to learn what I can from both the speakers and the people in the audience. So thank you very much for that opportunity. So as described in my little bio, which I'm going to rework now, I have been in the oil and gas industry for over 20 years, off and on. Mostly in the IT area. And what that's afforded me is the opportunity to really understand how oil and gas businesses work. So I have a good understanding of what makes them succeed and what makes them fail. Yeah, I've also worked in the UK and the US. Okay, I'll get into this now. So the first thing that I want to really emphasize is that we're not facing an economic crisis. That's not to say that we don't have challenges, because we certainly do. But language like crisis creates fear and calls for rash action rather than a sensible, balanced approach. We are facing economic challenges, and so is the rest of Canada, and our government takes this very seriously. Alberta still has the highest per capita income and one of the lowest unemployment rates in Canada. We're actually at the third lowest unemployment rate right now. The challenge is to maintain these advantages and to capitalize on the opportunities that present themselves. In that regard, economic growth and diversification needs to work for all Albertans, not just some of us. So what about diversification? While interest rates are low, we must invest in capital projects, so things like childcare. So we have spaces for people that want to go to work. We need to invest in public transportation so people can get to work.
Hey,
Can I finish and then I'll answer your questions?
vote it MVP.
Hey, buddy, let her finish, right?
Awesome. Quality healthcare and accessible education. All of these enable us to be economically competitive. These are the foundation elements of strong economic growth. So what have we accomplished so far? It's been since May 5th, the election. So what we've done, those people sound a lot like the wild rose in question period, I'm just saying that. We've banned corporate and union political donations to create a fair political landscape. We've increased corporate taxes. So Alberta has been a lucrative market, and those companies that have benefited can contribute just a little bit more to support the well-being of all Albertans. We've eliminated the regressive flat income tax, which is going to be a big benefit, especially for those people who are making less than $125,000 a year. We've invested in healthcare, education, and human services, and we're developing a plan to invest in infrastructure. We've increased the minimum wage, and that's so Albertans can adequately support their families. We feel that the moderate increase in corporate taxes will help support the economy by reinvesting in public infrastructure while keeping Alberta competitive. The evidence is very clear that cutting corporate taxes does not stimulate economic growth. This tax increase does not affect small businesses. That's not who's being affected by this increase. As far as personal income tax, the inequality that we've seen in the past has been a barrier for growth. So by asking those people who can afford it to pay a little bit more, we can make much needed investments to keep the economy moving and to allow us to emerge from this time stronger than we are right now. A progressive income tax takes Alberta out of the Stone Age and back in line with the rest of Canada. So again, anyone earning less than $125,000 a year, which is a lot of Albertans, will not see an increase in their income tax. The minimum wage in Alberta has fallen behind earnings of Albertans in general, so that we have the highest weekly earnings of $29.24 an hour, but the lowest minimum wage, which I believe is $10.20 right now. So this has created one of the highest levels of inequity in Canada. Alberta families are better off when all families are better off. And over the next 3 years, we're implementing incremental increases to the minimum wage so that by 2018 it will be $15 an hour. And we will continue to consult with the stakeholders to ensure that this has the least effect on business while also ensuring Alberta families are supported. Approximately 369,000 Albertans currently earn $15 an hour or less. And it's our skilled, educated, and ambitious people that make Alberta a great place to start a business and create jobs, not the lowest minimum wage. $15 an hour by 2018 will not change that. So while times are challenging, Alberta is still doing well economically, and we're in a great position with our resources, with our well-educated workforce, and with our stable infrastructure. We are engaging in reviews of the royalty structure for resources to ensure that Albertans get their fair share. We're seeking the guidance of the former Bank of Canada Governor David Dodge to evaluate the way forward for public infrastructure. And we're undertaking a review of our environmental practices to ensure responsible development of natural resources. We've engaged nonpartisan leaders in these fields so that we get the best information possible. So what I want to close in saying is that our new government we're looking at the economy with new eyes, and we are deeply committed to responsible management of the economy. Thank you.
Yeah, I see it. Yeah. No.
Would be a good speakers corner moment.
feel like we should get a third kind of stand just so that Greg can also enjoy the weight of having it set up. Just give me one moment here to set a timer. Oh, okay. Just for my own purposes. Can everyone hear me? Is it good in the back? So, let me tell you really quick how I came to stand on this stage, because if you're anything like me, you're looking at these three highly accomplished people and myself, and the little song from Sesame Street, which of these things is not like the others, is starting to play in the back of your mind. Now, I came to Speaker's Corner a few months ago to see a public debate on atheism versus Christianity, which sounded like it was going to be pretty interesting, and it was pretty interesting. Afterwards, I came up and said, you know, I've been involved in debate for a long time, and right now I work as a teacher of debate, and if you ever need someone to, you know, fill in if someone drops out or something, I'd be more than happy to pitch in what I can. And they said, sounds great, how about you do this debate on the Alberta economy? And I thought, sure, why not? I'll give my best. Now, being a debater, you learn how to sound like you know what you're talking about, regardless of... Yeah, man. He actually is agreeing with my point that I sometimes sound like I know what I'm talking about, even when I have absolutely no idea what I'm talking about. So my first thought on hearing this particular topic was, I have no idea how to solve the Alberta economic crisis. And the more I researched, the more I realized how little I knew about all of the problems and opportunities in the Alberta economy. So that is going to be the theme of my arguments today, is that I don't know, and moreover, I don't think anyone really knows. And I think we should design policies that embrace that ignorance and try to find out what the best option is, rather than proposing options that may or may not work and crossing our fingers and hoping real bad. So I have a few elements to this. I'm going to start off by saying that we need to change the metrics that we use to measure economic health. So right now, the primary metric that is used is what's called gross domestic product, or GDP. GDP is a measure of consumption. It measures how many dollars are spent every year in a particular area by everyone total together. There are a few reasons why this is not a very good metric. Quick show of hands, has anyone made a purchase that they really regretted later? Yeah, everyone. To an economist, all of those were awesome boons to the economy. They do not count whether or not it was actually good for your life. As long as you're consuming, the economy is growing. That seems weird. Moreover, how many people had houses or property that was damaged during the floods? Was there anyone that was like negatively impacted by that? Maybe a little bit? Greg? Yeah. All of the spending that was fixing all of the houses that were destroyed during the floods, that was a huge economic boon if you count this metric. Why? Well, because there was spending on rebuilding. If instead we had prevented that damage with the proposed barriers to the river, we would not have seen that enormous economic boon. So again, that is not really exactly what we want to measure here. That doesn't seem like something that's good for the economy. Well, what are we trying to measure? What is the purpose of economics? And here I'm kind of going to piggyback on what Janet was saying. The purpose of economics is to put people to work, to figure out what are the things that we can do that will provide the most for the well-being of everyone. But well-being is a very slippery concept. It has a lot of different elements to it. And because of that, economists, liking numbers, have decided not to measure it and to use consumption instead. Well, we live in the 21st century now. Data collection is easier than ever. And the OECD in 2013 released a report called How Was Life, which lays out a program for how to measure subjective well-being. They use a variety of metrics. They look at educational attainment. They look at health status. They look at work-life balance and social connectedness. Do you feel like you're a member of a community? Do you feel like you have enough time to spend with your family? They look at things like civic engagement. Do people come out to awesome events like Speaker's Corner and engage with big ideas and with political leaders? They also look at environmental quality, personal security, and just asking people, how do you feel? Are you happy? Are you content? If we use a wide basket of these kinds of metrics, we'll have a much better sense of when Alberta is and is not in a time of crisis. Is life getting worse? Maybe, but the fact is right now we don't know, and we should measure, and that will help us figure out what the answers to these kinds of questions are. That's my first point. My second point is that we need more experimental policy. We need to run policy experiments. Now, this is one of these ideas that once you hear it, when you first hear it, you'll think, that seems really weird, but the more that you think about it, well, thank you very much, Janet. I think so too. there are a few ways that you can do this. One of them is pilot programs. If you have some big policy idea that you want to implement, run it on a small scale first and see whether or not it works. This is helpful for a variety of reasons. If you run it on a smaller scale, you'll find problems and failures that then you can correct when you implement it on a larger scale. Another possibility is creating different laws in different areas and measuring the comparative effects of them. A great example of this would be the minimum wage. I think a $15 minimum wage sounds awesome, but the reason is that I'm 22 and I'm unemployed, and $15 an hour seems like a lot of money to me. But I don't know what the effect is on the larger economy, and the fact is most economists agree that the effect is relatively small in either direction, and that right now the data is not clear enough to make a really clear judgment one way or the other. Well, what if we instituted it that some areas in Calgary had a $15 an hour minimum wage, and other places had a $13 an hour minimum wage, and others kept the current minimum wage? When we compare what happens in the economies of these different areas in the city, we'd be able to determine what the positive and negative effects of these kinds of policies are, and that would allow us to overcome the ignorance about the future that we have, the fact that we don't really know the impacts of these kinds of policies. The last element is that I think it's really important to introduce what are called sunset provisions into law. Sunset provisions are essentially expiry dates for regulations, for laws. What it means is that there's going to be a necessary time when we have to discuss the same issue again and to determine whether or not it actually worked. It's kind of weird if you think about it, because most of the laws that are on the books were written before many of us were born. We are ruled by dead men, and I think that that's a little bit strange, that we should accept the fact that the world is changing, and that even ideas that are really good at the time may not be the best idea 10, 15, or 50 years in the future. So if we have expiry dates for laws, we will come back, we'll think about them again, and we will identify what things actually really work. So we need to run experiments in policy, but I also think that we need to have policies that encourage experimentation more generally. I have a few examples of these for you. The first off is charter schools. Does everyone know what a charter school is? Show of hands. Is there anyone that really doesn't know what a charter school is? Okay. A charter school is publicly funded, but it has a private mandate. So it does things in a different way than the normal public system, despite being fully funded by public monies. Now, currently in Alberta, we are the only province that has charter schools, but we have a cap of 15. There can only be 15 charter schools in Alberta. Currently, there are 13 that are running 22 different campuses, compared to almost 1,500 normal public schools. I can see no good reason why we should not increase or eliminate the cap for how many charter schools there are. Why? Well, because charter schools do things that are new and that are different and that are experimental. And the lessons that we learn from a charter school's approach to education are actually, by law, supposed to be integrated into the larger public system. Let's do things on a small scale, figure out what works, and then bring those ideas to everybody. Here's another one. Prize funding research. So currently, most scientific research that is publicly funded is funded through what are called grants. In order to get a grant, you as a scientist write out an application saying why your experiment is almost certain to find the result that you want it to find, that it's going to basically teach you nothing. The people that award grant funding are extraordinarily conservative. They do not want to spend money on experiments that don't go anywhere or that we don't learn anything from. And so they tend to fund things that are the next tiniest incremental step from what is already known. I think that that works in many areas, but it also has many failings. It doesn't identify lone geniuses. It doesn't allow people to try out new approaches to old problems. Instead, I think that we should include what's called prize funding, where we say, we want a discovery that solves this particular problem, and we will pay 10 or 50 or $100 million to whoever solves this problem. At that point, if you can be a lone inventor in a garage, you can be a venture capitalist who assembles a crack team of scientists, or you can be the UFC. It doesn't matter. As long as you find the answer, you will make the money. This actually goes back to the early 1700s with the invention of what was called the Longitude Prize. Within 20 years, one of the hardest problems in celestial navigation had been solved because they had established a prize as opposed to giving grant funding to people who are already incrementally making gains on that problem. The guy that solved it, by the way, was 21, which makes even me feel a little bit sad about the state of my life right now. So by creating essentially a market for useful innovations, I think that we will find more and more creative solutions to these old problems, these tough nuts to crack. Now, I'm running out of time here, but I have one more thing that I wanted to talk about. which is the development of high-density cities. Now, this may seem like it's a little bit out of character with the rest of my speech because this is a suggestion for an answer, but I assure you that it does fit into the system of I really don't know, because the idea of high-density cities is that we don't know the kinds of large-scale projects that genuinely make places good to live. In fact, most of the research on this, most of it's done by a fellow named Edward Glaser. He has more than 4,000 citations, which are the academic equivalent of likes on Facebook, on his 1991 paper called Growth in Cities. And the major finding of this was that cities that are reliant on one major industry tend to fail over time. And the reason is that industries are volatile, even ones that seem extraordinarily large and extraordinarily stable. And the classic example here is Detroit and Flint, right? These used to be hotbeds of innovation. If you go back to the 1890s, these were the Silicon Valleys of their day. But over time, they centered around these few major industries and these few major companies, and when things went bad for those companies, entire cities were destroyed. Overwhelmingly, cities that have long-term sustainability, that are great places to live for centuries, have a proliferation of small businesses, of people trying to figure out what other people want and finding a way of bringing that thing to them cheaply and conveniently. So high-density cities increase the number of what are called collisions, moments of interaction between strangers. And the more collisions that you have, the more meetings of minds that you have, the more ability you have to find new ideas, to implement new businesses, and that is better for all of us. Now, high-density cities are already coming to Alberta, but I think we need to really focus on the creation of them. Things like mixed-use zoning, things like density development around public transit, things like programs for social capital, having street festivals, having organizations like Speaker's Corner, and the encouragement of small businesses through, let's say, loans, tax reductions, or the kinds of cut red tape initiatives that Mayor Nenchi's already started to introduce. So high-density cities is an answer, but it is an answer that embraces ignorance. And if you're anything like me, I hope that you will embrace your ignorance and try to implement some policies that will allow us to solve these problems, regardless of what we know right now. Thank you very much.
Okay, so what I was afraid was going to happen has just happened. And that is, Keenan has just kicked all of our butts. I gotta tell you that. That's remarkable. That was fantastic. So thank you. I don't think I need the music stand. It'll probably blow away. So thank you all. Thank you to Gabor and Elia for the opportunity to be here and to participate in something that has its roots in literally thousands of years of human history. And the idea of democracy goes back that far. And democracy is really about freedom of speech and the opportunity to share ideas, and for you to learn from me, for you to challenge what I say, and for me to learn from you and from my colleagues up on the stage. And I can tell you, in the time that I've been engaged actively in politics here, going back a couple of years, has been the time of greatest personal growth and learning for me my entire life. And every single day is a learning experience. Sometimes we learn by reading books, by listening to others. Sometimes we learn by making spectacular mistakes. I sincerely hope it's more of the former and not the latter here today. But it is a real honor to be here. In the spirit of change and renewal that we've seen in the Alberta legislature for really almost the first time in my life, I was 5 months old when Peter Lougheed was first elected in the Legislative Assembly. There is a new sense of opportunity and purpose in the Alberta legislature. And I'm going to reflect that by agreeing with a lot of what Karen said. Now, although Karen and I are in different political parties, I agree that the premise of the question we're here to debate is in fact, may not in fact be true. That Alberta is not currently today in an economic crisis. We only have 5.7% unemployment in this province. We added nearly 23,000 new jobs in Alberta in the last 12 months. We have nearly the highest level of total employment in this province we've ever had. Most jurisdictions would look at that and say, wow, that's a place I want to be. And I will say, that is something that I think Jim Prentice, one of the many things he didn't understand and got wrong in this last election, was in fact the state of Alberta's economy today. However, the trend, I think, is not our friend. The number of people claiming employment insurance in Alberta is up over 60% in the last year. Although it is still only half what it was in the 2008 financial crisis, that does give us a sense, if you look at the graph, that in fact we may be on our way there again. And the worst news is that there are fewer jobs for those losing their jobs. Job vacancies in this province have dropped nearly 30% from a year ago, and job vacancies are at their lowest rate in nearly 3 years. So that's a challenge for the economy of Alberta, for any of those of you who have either recently lost your jobs or who in fact are looking for work. It is a challenging time. And Alberta does have that cyclical economy and cyclical nature to it. So the question I have and I seek to answer today is, what role does government have in ensuring we have a strong and resilient economy? What is the role of government as opposed to the role of the private sector? Where's the intersection between those two things? Now, I believe that the role of government is to provide an environment in which an economy can emerge, in which the private sector can work and create jobs, and there will always be ups and downs, but the government should use its levers and tools at its control to shave off those peaks and valleys of the economy, known also as Keynesian economics. That means as we enter a downturn, we have an opportunity, I think, and as Karen mentioned, as interest rates are low, to invest in infrastructure. And in this province, we have a significant infrastructure deficit. We've had decades of underinvestment in things like schools, in particular schools, but also healthcare facilities, road infrastructure, transit in particular. So we have an opportunity to invest in those things. We also need to understand and recognize that the world around Alberta is changing very quickly. And as Janet said, the world is seeking a lower carbon future. We have an opportunity in this province, however, to not simply fend that off, pretend it isn't happening. We have an opportunity in this province to turn what may appear to be a negative into a positive. And I'll agree with Karen, that actually is what Wild Rose sounds like in the legislature. So, what does leadership look like for Alberta? Does leadership look like creating crown corporations? By Alberta taxpayers, the government of Alberta, on behalf of citizens and taxpayers, going into business directly and say perhaps investing in an upgrader to quote unquote add value to Alberta's energy assets? Is the role of government to perhaps purchase an airline because we think the airline industry is going to thrive? Is the role of government perhaps to purchase a government-owned wind farm and pursue renewable energy strategy in that way? My argument to you is that is not the role of government. The role of government is to create policy and economic frames that will nudge the private sector in one direction or another. So we succeed in this province by allowing entrepreneurs to pursue purposeful economic diversification, pivoting off of what we already do really well. We have an incredibly highly educated workforce in this province. We have some of the highest education in Alberta of anywhere in the world. We have a very strong, open entrepreneurial culture. We have an open and welcoming environment for new Canadians. What we haven't done a good enough job at is engaging First Nations, Métis, Aboriginal Canadians, and allowing them to truly be part of Albertan society, including being part of our economic success, but it's certainly not limited to that. It must be a broad-based view. So we succeed, I think, by allowing entrepreneurs to tell us what our economy will be, and trying not to be something we're not. So we're not likely to be manufacturing Tesla cars in Medicine Hat. Much as we might think Tesla may be the way of the future, we can't fit that round peg into a square hole. Calgary Economic Development has a 6-point strategy, which I think is a very strong model to what they call building on our energy. And it is what I would consider not an either-or strategy, it's an and strategy for Alberta that recognizes we can and must continue to be a leader in traditional hydrocarbon energy production. We can do that in this province. We can continue, I believe, to expand Alberta's oil sands without having undue impact on climate change. And we do that by finding ways of reducing the impact of our energy production on climate change. I agree with Janet. We need to reduce coal-fired power in this province. We need to accelerate the end of life of coal-fired power. Alberta burns more coal than anywhere else in this country combined, and that's not acceptable. But we can continue to use that well-educated and innovative workforce, the stable environment, the stable and strong legal system, to attract energy investment and drive innovation from this province. We do that also by supporting a strong and broad-based post-secondary education system that is not picking and choosing. We will educate people in just these particular boxes. We'll have a very wide-ranging a group of people who are educated in post-secondary education. Engineers, accountants, pipe fitters, welders, sociologists, political scientists, artists. That's what a strong economy is built from. Allow those people, like Keenan said, to have those collisions and work well together innovatively. That strong culture of entrepreneurship, I think we have to be very careful when we start talking about raising taxes on large corporations. Now, while I agree that large corporations can and should pay their fair share, my belief is we've gone one step too far. Alberta had a 10% corporate tax rate on large corporations. The NDP has raised it to 12, which puts us about in the median for the country. We would have raised it to only 1%. So that means I would drop Alberta's large business tax rate by 1%. That keeps us at the lowest tax rate in the country. It doesn't create any incentive for our companies to leave Alberta. It continues to create a positive incentive for those companies to move into Alberta. We also need to look at gradually reducing small business tax in this province. We need to reduce barriers for entrepreneurs to create that next economy in this province. Manitoba has had great success in this. Over the course of a decade, they've gradually reduced their small business tax to the point where they have eliminated small business tax in Manitoba for earnings up to $425,000 a year. What's the impact of that been? They've lost exactly $0 to their provincial treasury, because what they've done is they've created more and more diverse small businesses, which has created literally thousands of jobs in Manitoba. We need to look outside the borders of Alberta for examples that work. We pair that with our entrepreneurial culture, we can succeed. We must innovate. We must strengthen access to high-speed broadband and fiber optic internet all around this province, not just in the big cities, but outside the big cities in rural Alberta as well. So we have the Alberta SuperNet, but it hasn't been deployed terribly well. There's a request for proposal process which is going forward here over the course of the next 3 years. We have an opportunity to expand broadband internet access to economic development organizations, to schools, to government offices in rural Alberta, and that will spur innovation. Ensure our quality of life remains high. Great healthcare, great neighborhoods, great education, and safe communities will allow people to continue to come to Alberta and continue to thrive. Ensure that prosperity that we talk about is shared. We must, tackle inequity, and we must tackle poverty in this province. When we talk about minimum wage, we haven't talked about overall poverty reduction. Minimum wage, I believe, must be seen in a larger frame of poverty reduction. Wage is only one part, an important part, but only one part of a much larger discussion about poverty reduction. What if a $15 minimum wage, in fact, hurts the people it sets out to help more than it actually helps them? What if importing an American Fight for 15 model into a Canadian system simply doesn't work? In the US, they don't have a public healthcare system. They barely have a public education system. They don't have the social safety net that we have in this country and in this province. So what if raising that minimum wage to $15 an hour means that there are fewer $15 hours available? What if it means that smaller business in Alberta are going out of business? What I would like to see is a government that is willing to evaluate as they go. There is in fact a study, it's a question I asked a question period. There's a study out of Quebec that shows that if the minimum wage is 45% or under of the median wage of the province, then we will not have the undue impact we want on small business. In Alberta, that would make it approximately a $14 minimum wage, and if that weekly wage drops, that would be less than that. Unfortunately, what we have is a government that said, hell or high water, we're going to $15 because we said we're going to $15. I'm not against a $15 minimum wage. I want to see clear evidence that it in fact is having a beneficial impact and not a detrimental one. And finally, let's be sure we leverage our collaborative nature in this province. We are better at solving problems through partnership here than by an adversarial approach. And that means more partnerships between government, between business, between post-secondary and research institutions. And in conclusion, I think what we have in this province is an opportunity to embrace climate change and environmental responsibility as a way to pivot our economy and diversify our economy, while still continuing to support our traditional economy in energy, oil, and gas. Thank you very much.
Well, thank you all. This has been illuminating. this is an opportunity for each of you to comment upon each of the other, should you wish to or care to. Does anyone wish to say anything about Janet?
Okay. I think it was it Keenan? It's Keenan, right? Did you or Greg mentioned the Detroit, you're right. It was an example, actually, I was going to use myself. And when you talk about the price that Albertans, in particular maybe Calgarians, but let's just say Albertans could pay if we don't, and I'll just use the colloquialism, get with the program and embrace change, as opposed to waiting until it's forced upon us because things are more desperate, then Detroit is exactly the image that has come to my mind. And I'll just add here, I was the Green candidate in Calgary Foothills, the riding from which Prentice resigned, right, on election night. So I have the opportunity to do that again. And if any of you wants to see what a monoculture looks like in the suburban context, go visit Calgary Foothills. This is Edgemont North. Edgemont is stellar in comparison with much of the rest of the riding. And it's so abusive of the people that live there because the absolute impossibility of the kind of collisions that Keenan has described, when there is only residential, only homes, only houses, nothing else, you cannot possibly have the kind of creative, vibrant kind of life which some of us are lucky enough to enjoy in this wonderful city. So it's ultimately about fairness, it's about social justice, it's about everybody being entitled to a vibrant kind of life, and of course the economy would benefit from greater collisions and more creativity.
Thank you. Anyone else? Keenan?
Yeah, so if you ever want to get scared, the other element that made it so that Detroit collapsed in on itself was the fact that it had enormously expansive suburbs. And the reason is that really large suburbs are perhaps nice to live in with white picket fences and whatnot, but they are extraordinarily expensive to maintain because you have huge numbers of roads, street lights, etc. for each person who's paying taxes. And what that means is that when people start to move out of the neighborhood, it is very difficult to maintain the same levels of services, and that's why you may have heard horror stories coming out of Detroit about the end of police patrols and the shutting off of street lights. It's just because there's too few people per block in order to maintain those kinds of services. So by having denser cities, you make it cheaper on a per person basis to maintain them, and it makes them more resilient in the long run. Now, the one thing I wanted to ask, because I feel on the subject of monocultures that we have all sort of been agreeing with each other, which is a little bit out of the character for Speaker's Corner, where do all of you disagree with each other is the real question I want answered.
I guess, to me, it really is about enabling the private sector to create those jobs. And what I worry about is that we, and I'll even say this to Karen here. What I worry about is we may have a government that is willing to either invest directly in business and choose to get involved in crown corporations, or impose policies that are punitive, that would say, for example, require some sort of upgrading on bitumen before it gets shipped down a pipe, for example, which would perhaps not have the desired effect. What it would mean is that oil sands is not produced in the first place. And I also quarrel with the term value add in and of itself, which implies that what we do today does not add any value. So again, we're 3 months in, and we're all finding our own way, but these are the sorts of things that I think it is important. Even though it's imperfect, there are going to be ups and downs. I do think taking a market-driven approach is fundamentally the best way to do it.
So the thing that I'm hearing up here from all of us is that we're pretty much all on the same team, even though we're not in the same party. We don't talk amongst each other regularly. The commitment is that Alberta's economy is strong and thriving, and that people have the opportunity to be employed. As far as your concern about upgrading, I'm not actually in a position to answer that on behalf of the government, but I can scoot forward so I can see you. I can answer as to my own point of view on that. And I think what's important is that government creates policies that encourages responsible development of the economy. And part of that, upgrading bitumen within Alberta is a great idea. And so if we can create that environment so that happens with more regularity, we do have a bit of it happening now, but to have more of those jobs in the upgrading area happen in Alberta rather than downstream, I think makes a lot of sense.
This is, I think, a good point of discussion. Yeah, and sorry, I'll hand it over to Janet. I don't want to hog the microphone here, but I think that's actually a good point of I think differentiation. About 45% of Alberta's bitumen is already upgraded in this province because the market determined that was an appropriate number. You look at Suncor and their Voyageur plant. They tried to build that upgrader twice. They started it. The economics in 2007-8 proved that it wasn't going to be fruitful for them. It stopped. They started it again, and they stopped it again about a year or two ago, and they've mothballed it entirely. North America's energy market is a fully integrated marketplace. You want refined product at closest point of consumption. That's why the refineries are down east. It's why they're near Chicago. It's why they're in the Gulf Coast. We just simply don't consume that much here. So that's, I think, a really good example. It would be lovely if we could simply say, let's just create jobs here. I don't believe we're quote-unquote shipping jobs down the pipe. We're creating many jobs in Alberta, and I just look no further than the Northwest Upgrader. It's potentially going to cost Alberta taxpayers up to, by some estimates, $26 billion over 30 years to upgrade bitumen, and by the way, also increase our carbon footprint. Although that potentially could be that plant does have some new technology that may have an impact on that. But I think that's actually a really good example, and one area we'll keep a close eye on, because we can't just wave a magic wand. The market will determine what is the best use of that capital, because the billions of dollars required to develop those upgraders would either go to Alberta to develop the upgrader, or they would go somewhere else. They would go to the Permian Basin in the U.S. They would go to offshore Newfoundland. They would go into a completely different source. So I think that's something we need to be very mindful of and aware of as we move and go forward.
Just wanted to follow up to what I find part of what I find so interesting about what Keenan has had to say. I've talked about exactly these questions about suburban development, the costs. Mayor Nenshi often says we've developed a city we can't afford to maintain. This just can't go on. People say yeah, but isn't that all about city council's authority and city council's decision making as opposed to the provincial government? And actually, I think not. In the same way as Greg is talking about largely a provincial government, sometimes a bit of federal stuff thrown in, but largely a provincial government creating the framework within which Albertans can innovate and create businesses and flourish and so on. What we want, I think, is a provincial framework within which Alberta cities and municipalities have to operate, and it would go to questions of diversity, walkability, creativity, all those things relating to getting as far away from Detroit and monocultural suburbs and more like this, quite frankly. And so I think the provincial government could play an enabling role, creating that framework, and we'd see much better urban centers in Alberta, actually, and for all Albertans, including those people in newer areas.
Thank you very much, everybody. Gabor,
Anybody else? Any further interventions? In that case, we're going to open up the floor to the public to ask questions. Before I do that, though, we have a tradition here at Speaker's Corner. We really are appreciative to each and every one of our speakers for taking time out from their busy schedules for coming out. And we offer these little certificates of appreciation to thank you for coming. And we say to each of you, a thank you for dedicating time and effort by speaking at Speaker's Corner Calgary. And thanks to your contribution of ideas and energy, we are better able to inform, enlighten, and entertain a more vibrant Calgary. So Janet Keeping, thank you. Greg Clark, thank you. Keenan McNeil, thank you. Karen McPherson, thank you. Now, before we open up the floor, I just want to share with the audience that we're trying to be innovative at Speaker's Corner as well, and we're trying to make our programs increasingly more relevant, attract larger audiences, and it's always a question of experimentation. We never know who's going to show up, what's going to attract public interest, and so on and so forth. So we're always in a stage of experimentation. And today's debate was obviously very important, very relevant, but within the context of innovation, experimentation, and fulfilling the mandate of Speaker's Corner, I'd like to, in some instances, get into the area of the absurd and the trivial, and for humoristic reasons. And Keenan knows what's coming. One of the topics that I've dearly wanted to have debated from day one, and it also has political implications, would be a resolution. Be it resolved that Parliament repeal the law of gravity. And I've been trying to get two people to debate this, and no one's come forward. And so this is my opportunity to publicly challenge and shame Keenan into accepting the challenge. And I'm prepared to take either side of that debate. And I'm prepared to pit my ossified, past middle-aged brain against his brilliant 22-year-old agile brain. I've offered him the opportunity to take either side of the debate, and this is my public challenge, quasi-shaming, and he doesn't have to accept today, but I hope he will. Having said that, the floor is now open for questions and comments. Mr. Terleski, come on up.
Behind the speakers, that's right. You got the sunglasses a little more personable. Gabber kind of hit it there, defying the law of gravity. And I kind of almost think that's sometimes what the NDP does, and a little bit from Janet. I read the paper every day. I would assume you probably have aides that do. If you're in government, you probably do yourself. There have been hundreds upon hundreds upon hundreds of layoffs in this province in the past 3 months. The Alberta Food Bank has tripled its response. They're almost out of food. That is because of all the layoffs. I think Mr. Clark hit it on the nose a few times there. But to get up and tell Alberta that our economy is doing well and things are great is either, what the NDP hinted at it, is either grossly naive or deeply dishonest, and I'm not sure which one it is. But we are not facing good times right now. My personal stocks have gone down about 300% actually, and I'm not a millionaire. These are just small stocks, and they've gone down 300 points. So things aren't great. But what's going to change in the future? What's going to happen? Now, we made a reference to the Wild Rose Alliance, and I don't represent the Wild Rose, sounding like the screeching machines that are across the street. But what has the Wild Rose really told Albertans in the last 2 weeks? Well, I'll give you a couple of examples. They've told us that the Chief of Staff of the Energy Minister of Alberta is a registered lobbyist against oil and gas. He is registered in Ottawa as a lobbyist to lobby against oil and gas. Now, I don't expect Ms. Keaton here to advance the oil and gas industry in this province. She's in the Green Party. I respect that. But your Energy Minister, whose Chief of Staff is a person that is lobbied to lobby against the fundamental biggest job employer in this province, and that person is the Chief of Staff of the Energy Minister, that's a problem. Mr. Egan, let's talk about him for a second. He's a government minister. There was a video of him standing in front of the legislature in Edmonton yelling, "No more approvals, no more approvals." What approvals is he talking about? He means any approvals for oil and gas pipelines extended, period. And he is a minister in the NDP government. This is all public record, folks. You can find it on the internet, it's all there. That to me is deeply troubling when you talk about introducing something new in Alberta. It's going to be new, ladies and gentlemen. You can bet your bottom dollar it's going to be new. And if we don't get it right in the next 6 months, it's going to chase jobs out of this province faster than you can say kazoom. That's the reality. So what I'd like to know is how, when Ms. Keenan talks about jobs are being replaced by greener jobs, he said there are more greener jobs coming into the industry. I'd like to research that a bit, but if you sat here for the last, and we're just about finished, for almost the last 45 minutes that we have been speaking, there has been a steady stream, not a small stream, but a steady stream of vehicles going by this way and by that way. And ladies and gentlemen, that steady stream is not going to stop anytime soon. So the idea that our province is going to wean off of oil and gas anytime in the next 100 years, I think is ludicrous. It's not going to happen. Am I in favor of reducing coal production? For sure. Am I in favor of making sure the water that comes from up near Fort McMurray down into my water pipes should be clean? You betcha, I don't have a problem with that. But telling people that we're going to wean off of oil and gas is like telling Texas they're not going to sell any more guns. The two ain't going to happen anytime soon. So I guess, Mr. Clark kind of hit it when he said, really, it was very Reaganistic, and that almost government should get out of the way when it comes to creating business and creating prosperous provinces. It's not the role of government, as the NDP sees it, to make laws and orders and rules to prosper the economy. It's to help that economy prosper. And I think you were right. You're probably not a Reaganistic, but government needs to get out of the way, not become the big father of the economy. So I guess I'd like to ask our NDPer, how does she see her party helping growth in Alberta when she has so many people around the Premier that are really, in fact, against oil and gas?
Can I just respond? First of all, I went out of my way, Merle, to say at the beginning of my remarks that nobody in their right mind is talking about ending fossil fuel industries in Alberta in short order. Nobody is talking about that. It's absolutely not possible. And it's not even desirable from a green perspective, because Greens are all about sustainability, including social and economic sustainability. I did insist the change is upon us, and change is upon us. And Harper himself, a huge fan of the Alberta oil and gas sector, right? A real cheerleader, signed that agreement with the leaders of the G7 only several weeks ago, where they agree, for what it's worth, and it may not be worth very much, the paper that's written on, that the G7 will be off fossil fuels by the end of this century. Now, that's not me. That's Stephen Harper, who is very, very, very far from being green. And that's 85 years from now. So we'll see what happens, right? Well, I won't be around for that. But anyway, so I just wanted to say that, right? And when I say that going green can produce more jobs than are lost in other ways, the experience of a number of countries and in a number of sectors does substantiate that. I'm not predicting that will happen in Alberta, but it could happen in Alberta if we embrace the change that is coming, and it's going to be coming as a result of largely as a result of greenhouse gas, the necessity of reducing those emissions. It's going to come. It's coming now.
Thank you for your question. I'm afraid I'm not in a position to be able to speak to any hiring decisions in the Premier's office. I'm just not privy to that information. But okay, all right. I had heard Premier's office, so my apologies. And as far as the action of our present ministers before being in government, I'm really struggling with trying to address those concerns, but it sounds like what your concern is that our government is not committed to supporting the economy in a responsible, measured way. And while we haven't developed a lot of policy at this point, I can tell you that that is our commitment, that we're not on board to eradicate oil and gas from the economy. That's not possible. It's not realistic. There needs to be responsible development, and development in a way that benefits all Albertans, not seeing a lot of profits go out of the province, and not creating such a disparity between those people who are doing well because of the industry and those people who are not included in that. I hope that helps answer your question.
Thank you. Does anyone else have any questions they'd like to ask our panel today? Anything anyone's confused about? Okay, if I could just have you come on up, sir.
Thanks. I'd just like to have a couple of thoughts here. First of all, I think that Alberta is a great place and it's very prosperous, and people are moving here. The population has shifted from other provinces. Okay. Alberta is a great place. It's prosperous, and people are moving here from the rest of Canada, and it's because it's a great place to be. And then we've created an incredible environment for people to bring up families, and it's a great community. So I think that we should celebrate how far we've come and what we've created here. As I heard somebody say, we should make Alberta like the rest of Canada, but they're coming here we weren't going there. You know, I think that we have something really, really unique here that we've built, and that we should celebrate that and keep it going. And I think that, for instance, on the green area, we're so prosperous here. Like when I go across the border to BC, which is supposedly, you know, a very socially responsible area, I see clear cutting of forests everywhere I see. On this side of the Rockies, you know, I see pristine wilderness and great places to hike and be here in Alberta. You know, and this is what we've created with the prosperity that we've built here, and keeping that prosperity going helps us afford to be green in so many ways. One thing I haven't heard here, which I think is really important, is that the IT industry is so huge in Alberta because the oil and gas industry is so information technology intensive, from how they drill, how they communicate with one another. You know, we have the highest general education level of any province in Canada. And IT could be a huge growth area in the future as a spin-off benefit from having the energy industry. So as far as incubating information technology throw-offs, I think that that could be a huge benefit if we somehow have incubator areas, support research facilities and entrepreneurs and so on and so forth. As far as taxation of people earning more than X number of dollars, I think some research should be done on who are those people. You know, we kind of think of those as the rich cats, but what they might be could be information technology people, technologists, engineers, you know, all those things, not lawyers, forget those guys, tax them double. But I think that if you tax those people that are providing the entrepreneurship around information technology, which is the growth engine of the world, and I think some research should be done on that, and that would not be a good idea. So, in any case, a couple of thoughts.
Thank you, and I believe Greg had something he wanted to say about that.
Yeah, thanks. Just really briefly, I'm fiercely proud to be an Albertan. I'm lucky enough to have been born here. Many of us, though, you know, what I love about this province is that we're very much a province of people from somewhere else. And people come here, they work very hard, they contribute to our community, and they can do that. My wife is from the UK. We met 15 years ago or so in Australia. She went back to London, I came back here to Calgary. And then we started negotiating, who's going where, right? Am I gonna move to London or is she gonna move to Calgary? And eventually, fortunately, I wore her down and she said, all right, I will move to the colonies for 5 years. She said, but you and I both know that one day we're gonna go live in a real city. And I said, you know what? I'll take 5 years. That's a start. We'll see how that goes. After about 2 or 3 years, she works in healthcare. After a couple of years, she came home one day and said, I love this place. I want to live here the rest of my life. The quality of life is fantastic. The recreational opportunities are amazing. And I'll go to work. She told me a story. She went to her boss. She works as she's a doctor. Went to her boss, had an idea, and he said, that's a really good idea. Why don't you write that up, work with her, and I'll get the two of you a meeting with the dean. She said, the dean? I said, yeah, the dean of medicine. I said, well, I've only been here 6 months. How can I possibly be meeting with the dean of medicine? He goes, well, you think it's a good idea, right? Yeah. I said, well, go talk to the dean. He's a great guy. No problem. You guys will do fine. And after about 5 years of that, she kept coming up with new ideas. They kept saying yes. And she's up working at 1 o'clock in the morning every night. And she calls it the curse of the capable. That's what we have in Alberta. And I think we lose sight sometimes of how lucky we are, not just in Alberta and in Canada, but compared to the rest of the world, but compared to the rest of the country. There are other parts of this country that we can't do that. I look at how I started my business. Walked into the corner office of one of the tall towers downtown. I said, I have a business idea. And they said, you know what? I like that. We don't have a business company like that in Calgary. Yeah, I'll give you a chance. It wasn't, what school did you go to? Who are your parents? Do you work for a big firm? It's like, you know what? I like that. Yeah, let's try that. Yes, let's. That's the attitude we have in this province. So we need to nurture that, encourage that. That's our ace in the hole. You talk about IT and I talk about broadband internet. we got to be careful about being overly prescriptive in that. We're not going to create Silicon Valley North just by, investing lots and lots of money in that. We're going to create the environment in which that may happen. So I think that's where the Alberta SuperNet and high-speed broadband internet all around the province, that's going to create the environment where those kinds of companies can happen, and actually ties back to a lot of what we were talking about with these collisions in this great urban environment here. We have a high quality of life. We have great neighborhoods like this all around the province, not just in urban, but in rural communities as well. Then you'll be amazed what Albertans will come up with. I really think we can lead the world in many different areas, in areas that areas I don't understand or haven't even thought of yet. There are smart people working on amazing things. We need to enable them to do that and be successful.
I often start off talks of this kind by saying, Greens do stand in opposition to a lot that's being done. We're certainly firmly opposed to expanding the rate of production from the oil sands, for example. But that's not said out of a disrespect or a lack of love for Alberta. I'm an Albertan by choice. I'm well educated. I didn't need to stay here for the last 40 odd years, however long it's been since '73. What I care about is the future of Alberta. Do you know, I have 3 adult children, 1 in BC and 2 in Ontario, and my husband and I joked once the PCs were gone and the NDs had formed government that they could come back now. The political exiles were welcome. They all found that funny, but so far haven't made plans to move back. So there's nothing malicious, there's nothing disrespectful in criticizing some of how we do what we do or worrying out loud about the necessity of change. It is because I've loved living here, and Alberta's been very good to me. And I want the wonderfulness to continue, and it won't, for sure, if we put our energies into building up an industry such as the oil sands, which is in its twilight. It's impossible. So don't listen to the Canadian Association of Petroleum Producers when they say that we ought to be investing so as to increase the rate of production of the oil sands. It would be a very, very foolish thing to do. And I'll just say that while Alberta has certainly attracted many, many people of talent, many people of ambition, many people of vision, I'll have to say that as I have watched my grown children and their friends, their very good friends, what they did in where they sought to go to university and where they have started their careers, many of them with immense accomplishment and talent, it's been somewhere else because we've not been changing with the times, and that will be a tragedy if we don't turn that around. I'm very optimistic because we have a new government, which is not my party, led by my party, but it is much closer to the values that I think that I share, and I always knew a lot of Albertans did. So I'm optimistic, but not naively so, quite frankly.
I thought I might have something to say, but the thought has flown my mind. I just will say that what prompted me to get involved, I don't have a long political history, but what did prompt me to get involved was that I saw Alberta going in a direction that I wasn't comfortable with as an Albertan, and it made me angry, and yeah, I'm really happy, excited, and honored to be part of a government that is more committed to understanding what it is that Albertans want rather than telling them what they need.
You'll notice that there's no representative of the Progressive Conservative Party here, and it's not for lack of trying. We just couldn't get anyone here, so let that be noted. Anyone else? Come on up, sir.
Sorry, I'll just make my comments on my view of the Alberta economy and where it's heading and the drivers that you've talked about. Like, obviously, at the moment, the Alberta economy is very linked to oil and gas. I agree it has to move away. I think that the downturn, I think that we allude to the movements in the oil and gas. I really think you need to look at it as two things, short-term and long-term. the initial point, in the short term, what's caused this initial downturn is really current oil and gas technology. The fact that, what happened to gas prices, the drilling, the fact that you have that getting shale oil out of the ground is so cheap now in other places, and your upfront capital costs are so low in comparison to what you need in the oil sands or in the north, that why would anybody spend $2-3 billion on an upgrader when you can just go plunk a well somewhere else for $10 billion? Yeah, your unit capital cost might be the same, but your risks are much, much lower. And then in the long term, you also have the downward pressure on oil and gas, either for political reasons or just pure economic reasons. Like, I actually disagree that, we'll be driving petrol-driven cars in 50 years. I think we're one battery technology away from the disappearance. Like, if somebody figures out how to build a $5,000 battery, and we're down to, about $10,000 now, petrol-driven cars are gone. They'll disappear in 10 years' time. On to the secondary point about what Alberta can do to move away and develop other industries. I totally agree. It's a very, very educated workforce here. Like, Calgary probably has the white-collar population of a city 4 times as large. People come in. I came here. You can probably tell I'm Australian. I got brought here from somewhere else. I came to Alberta to work. Now, the one thing that I think that, we have this very educated workforce, but really, in my experience of other people who came here in my generation, millennials, I'm at the oldest end of the millennial generation, but heading down. One of the reasons we came here, quite simply, is the money. We make a lot more money, like I make way more money here than I could virtually anywhere else. And not just the money, but also the conditions. Like, you get 6-7 weeks vacation a year, which is fantastic. Oil and gas allows that. Now, as Alberta has to slowly move away from oil and gas, as this province moves away, I'm not sure that you'll be able to maintain those conditions. Your main component of costs in oil and gas isn't labor, it's other components. In technology industries, in medical industries, in all other things, in most other things, the way the world's going, your main component cost is labor costs. I'm not sure Alberta will be able to pay those salaries. So then you have to look at what are the other things which draw people to the place. And as you alluded to with your children's friends and your children, they moved other places. Probably a large chunk of that is Calgary. Calgary is a wonderful city to raise a family in that sort of respect. But no offense, from a nightlife perspective, this ain't New York. So you've got to start looking at that, and those aren't easy things. Those are, I think that, from zoning laws, from all those sort of things, it's more or less in the right direction. Quite simply, what drives a lot of those sort of things is just sheer population. There's not much you can, and you do what you can to do about that. And I'm not really saying that I have a solution. I'm just saying these are the problems and these are kind of the roadblocks which are in the way at this point in time. That's all I had to say. Thank you.
Of course, unfortunately, Greg has to go. He's got other engagements that he has to deal with. So thank you again for being here, sir. Did anyone want to answer that?
I really appreciated those remarks. And just let me comment on one thing that I've thought about a lot over the years. And that was that a lot of people come here for the money. Some of the people who come here for the money actually discover they really enjoy living here and they will stay even if they were to change fields and end up somewhere where they weren't making such bucket loads of money. Some of us came here because we fell in love with the landscape and then found an excuse to come here. In my case, originally graduate school in the Faculty of Environmental Design. And I really did fall in love with the landscape in Lundbrecht, Alberta. And then made my way back here. So I am deeply tied to this place and love it. But there is a difference between those people who really do love it and who stay here for the big paychecks. And that does influence the quality of our social life and Now the politics has changed, but it certainly influenced the politics for a long, long time.
Thank you. First off, I hear you, man, about the nightlife. I think that yes, I went to school in Montreal. This is no Montreal. I think that largely also has to do with the question of density, in that particularly for nightlife partying type experiences, driving is a terrible idea and public transit is a much better idea, but still really sucks. So living forever away from everything else makes it very difficult for people to congregate for whatever, particularly when there is any alcohol involved, which is somewhat annoying. Or any other substances Janet adds very liberally. I think that is one element of it. I think that responding to the point about coming to make a lot of money, and that is definitely true. I think that there's a lot to be said that many people come here for the money and end up staying because there's something more here. I hope that will be true for you as well. But the money only makes sense in terms of the costs that you have to pay in order to live the kind of life that you want. So if you look at some place like Fort McMurray, people make huge paychecks and end up spending extraordinary amounts on housing, on food, on transportation, etc., and end up making far less in real terms than they would like. I think that when it comes to Calgary in particular and other cities in Alberta, the major cost right now is real estate, it's housing for young people. And I think that it's the imbalance between the cost of housing and the declining potential wages of young people that may cause the mismatch. So if we have cheaper housing and lower wages, I think we'll be in a similar position. It's just if those are not aligned with each other that we run into the real danger zone.
That is a very good point. I know that we are looking at those, what are they called now? Micro condos? Yeah. 250 square feet. Woohoo! I feel great living in a 10 by foot room right now. Sir, you wanted to say something? Or would you like me to go before you? Okay.
So, I don't live here anymore. However, living in the eastern townships of Quebec has given me some valuable insight into ulterior energies, and I'm not sure if you have much sway in this matter, but really, like wind power, with their countless fields. I don't know how Alberta is for hydro, but we have the dam over here in Glenmore, and yeah, there's always answers to the petrol industry's power dependency. Please comment on this.
Now, we didn't quite catch the first part, but you basically were also talking about wind power. You don't think that the candidates here on stage have much sway in that? You and me both. I'm not well versed in politics either. Yeah. What was your first comment? The second one was on wind power, but what was the first one? Oh, okay. 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 He was saying that he was born here, and he's now living out in one of the townships. But he was asking, he doesn't know much about politics as myself. He's not very versed on it, but he wants to know, what kind of power do you really have to make any changes for the people when people come forward and start asking questions and giving you suggestions like about the wind power and how we can harness this and what difference is that actually going to make for the people here? Am I pretty close? Yeah? Okay, good. Who would like to answer that?
So, the ways that people in Alberta can have an influence over what kind of policies are created to encourage things like wind power development is by talking to their elected representative. Whether you voted for them or not, whether you voted or not, that is your voice, that's your entry into the government. And what the MLAs participate in are different committees within the government. So I'm on a few committees myself, a couple of legislative and a couple of caucus committees. And within those committees, that's where policy is formulated, that's where it's developed, that's where people can have their say. So your elected representative will go there, they'll speak to their peers, and they'll advocate on behalf of the people that have spoken to them regarding things like wind power. So if that's something that's really important to you, sit down and have a conversation with your MLA. Bring as much information as you can. We need to be educated. We cannot know everything. And we'll bring that forward for you. I hope that addresses your issue.
And it's obvious that there are other ways of having influence as well, right? By joining, whether it's the NDs as a political party or whether it's the Greens or it's another political party, because groups such as political parties and other groups prepare submissions to government. So government receives not only comments and ideas from individuals and individual constituents, but also from groups. And sometimes those are solicited, like say the advisory panel on our climate change strategy will be going around and consulting, or they can be unsolicited. You can just put them together on your own initiative. So there's lots of different ways of having impact. Some of them, of course, are more direct than others, but nevertheless.
Another thing that people can do is, if they feel really passionate about a particular issue, is drop a petition and have someone bring that petition forward within the legislature. And you can actually have a petition tabled with 5 signatures. You don't have to have thousands, it helps, but you can have a petition with as little as 5 signatures.
Just out of curiosity.
How many people here are from somewhere other than Alberta? Originally. Okay, that's interesting. I too am an adopted son of Alberta. Came here as a refugee from Quebec in 1976 when things became unstable and scary. And I agree with the comment made by Greg Clark in respect of Alberta being a welcoming place and affording a lot of us opportunities that we might not have had elsewhere. And I think that's a real key component of the Alberta advantage, I would think. And I just want to echo those sentiments. Anyone else want to say anything? You can rant, you can rave, you can ask questions, you can comment. Going once, going twice. Did you want to? Oh, he just wants to say thank you and congratulate the speakers. Okay, thank you very much. I think we're done. Okay, thank you so much. Bye-bye. And by the way, if you have any if you have any ideas about topics or speakers that you'd like to see here, please let us hear from you. We're always begging for new topics, new speakers, just to keep the thing going. And we only have a limited imagination bank, so to
Speak for yourself.
Huh?
Okay, I'm speaking for myself.
Okay.
So please do, and you can always